Good evening. Today is Sunday, May 3rd, 2026. I'm Rich Stevens, and this is The Cold Take. What you're about to hear is news from this week, taken only from primary sources like press conferences and court documents. You can find those sources and attribution for every story at thecoldtake.com. We begin in Washington, D.C., where Tuesday, April 28th, King Charles III of England addressed a joint session of the United States Congress. You may have heard that read 111th, but he's just the third, I promise. It was immediately clear that he has an excellent grasp of our shared language. He thanked the American people for welcoming him, quote, to mark this semi-quincentennial year of the Declaration of Independence. He expressed respect for the American Congress, referring to it as a, quote, citadel of democracy created to represent the voice of all American people to advance the sacred rights and freedoms. He said the Founding Fathers were bold and imaginative rebels with a cause, prompting cheers from across the chamber. During his visit, the King also went to Ground Zero in New York City and laid a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery. Sticking with world news, the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted. On April 19th, CENTCOM said U.S. forces disabled an Iranian-flagged cargo vessel attempting to enter Bandar Abbas and violate the U.S. blockade. They said the USS Spruance issued multiple warnings over 6 hours before disabling the vessel's propulsion. U.S. Marines then boarded the ship. CENTCOM also said U.S. forces had directed 25 commercial vessels to turn around or return to Iranian ports since the blockade began. On April 22nd, the UK said British and French military planners were leading more than 30 nations in planning a mission to reopen the strait, protect merchant vessels, and conduct mine-clearing operations. France has called for the unconditional, unrestricted, and immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Maritime Administration still says risks to commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, and Gulf of Oman remain high. The latest official status is an active U.S. blockade of Iranian ports and continued high-risk warnings for commercial vessels. If your brain did a backflip when the King said semi-quincentennial, then you're not alone. I think that's probably over the heads of most Americans. But the Cold Take is here to improve your vocabulary, hopefully make you laugh. Hit like and subscribe. Share this with your weird friends. Moving over to U.S. politics, Monday, April 27th, 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen of Torrance, California, was arraigned in federal court after the April 25th shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner. He's charged with attempted assassination of the President of the United States, interstate transportation of a firearm to commit a felony, and discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. Allen traveled by train from California to Washington, D.C., arriving April 24th and checking into the Washington Hilton. Shortly before 8:40 p.m. on April 25th, he ran through a security checkpoint with a shotgun and fired once. A Secret Service officer was struck in the chest, returned fire, and Allen was taken into custody without injury. The officer has since been released from the hospital and no other injuries were reported. Prosecutors say his actions were, quote, premeditated, violent, and calculated to cause death. They say additional charges are possible. They also said he was carrying a 12-gauge pump shotgun, a .38 caliber pistol, additional ammunition, and multiple knives. Whoa. Scooch that. On April 27th, the Supreme Court reversed a lower court ruling against Texas's 2025 congressional map. The order was short, and the court said, for the reasons set forth in Abbott v. League of United Latin American Citizens, we reverse the district court's judgment. Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson dissented. The lower court had blocked Texas from using the new map. The Supreme Court had already paused that ruling in December, allowing the map to be used for the 2026 election cycle. Texas was direct about the point of the map. In its own Supreme Court filing, the state said the legislature redistricted, quote, to secure 5 additional Republican seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted again. On Tuesday, April 28th, a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina charged Comey with 2 counts tied to a 2025 Instagram post. Yep, Instagram. The indictment says Comey posted a photograph of seashells arranged to read 8647. Prosecutors allege the post would be interpreted as a serious expression of intent to harm President Donald Trump. Count 1 charges Comey with threatening the president. Count 2 charges him with transmitting a threat in interstate commerce. DOJ says the charges carry a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison if convicted. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said, quote, "Threatening the life of the President of the United States is a grave violation of our nation's laws." After 75 days, the partial federal government shutdown came to an official end, even though ICE and CBP remain defunded. On Thursday, April 30th, the House passed 2 major bills following a late-night budget vote on Wednesday. First, the House passed the Farm, Food, and National Security Act by a vote of 224 to 200. The bill would continue and reform Department of Agriculture programs through fiscal year 2031. Later Thursday, the House passed H.R. 7147 by voice vote. That bill funds parts of the Department of Homeland Security, including TSA, Coast Guard, Secret Service, and FEMA, but sets funding for ICE and CBP border security operations to 0. Speaker Mike Johnson said Republicans plan to fund ICE and border enforcement separately through reconciliation when lawmakers return next week. That path was opened Wednesday night when the House passed a budget resolution by a vote of 215 to 211. Johnson also said the House renewed FISA, a Section 702 renewal, Wednesday by a vote of 235 to 191, but that bill still has to go to the Senate. On Wednesday, April 29th, the Supreme Court ruled that Louisiana's congressional map, with a second majority black district, is unconstitutional. The case is Louisiana v. Calais and began when Louisiana created the map after a lower court said its previous map likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But the Supreme Court ruled that the Voting Rights Act did not require Louisiana to create the additional majority-minority district. Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the 6-3 majority, saying no compelling interest justified Louisiana's use of race in drawing the map. The majority said Section 2 liability requires evidence supporting a strong inference that the state intentionally gave minority voters less opportunity because of their race. Justice Elena Kagan dissented, joined by Justices Sotomayor and Jackson. On Wednesday, April 29th, Florida lawmakers approved a new congressional map during a special session on redistricting. The House passed House Bill 1D by a vote of 83 to 28. The Senate approved it later the same day, 21 to 17. The plan redraws Florida into 28 congressional districts. Governor Ron DeSantis submitted the proposed map to legislative leaders on April 27th and urged lawmakers to adopt it during the session. The bill has now cleared the legislature and has been ordered enrolled, the final step before it's sent to the governor. The new map is expected to flip 4 blue seats red for the upcoming midterm elections. In current events, on August 7th of 2025, Florida Fish and Wildlife inspected Sanctuary World imports on International Drive in Orlando. FWC found 6 two-toed sloths at the site of a planned attraction called Sloth World. 2 were housed in cages that did not meet state requirements, and FWC issued a verbal warning. The report also documents an inquiry into 31 sloth deaths between December and February. According to the report, 21 sloths from Guyana died from what the licensee called cold stun after the building was not ready, lacked power and water, and heat failed during cold weather. 10 more sloths from Peru arrived in February of 2026. 2 were dead on arrival, the other 8 died later. In April, the Central Florida Zoo said it accepted 13 two-toed sloths from Sloth World and placed them in quarantine. The zoo later said all 13 survived their first 24 hours, though many were dehydrated and underweight. On April 29th, the zoo said one of the sloths, named Bandit, died after arriving in critical condition. No charges or fines are listed in the FWC report. The company website is down, and their last ex-post was December of 2025. On April 27th, the D.C. Circuit Court allowed the Pentagon to keep requiring journalists to be escorted inside the Pentagon while an appeal continues. The case was brought by the New York Times and reporter Julian Barnes over the Pentagon's press access rules. A district court had previously ruled against parts of the policy. The Pentagon then issued a revised policy closing the correspondence corridor and requiring escorted access. The D.C. Circuit Court's order is narrow and stays the district court's April 9th order only, quote, to the extent that it entitles journalists to access the Pentagon unescorted. The court said the department had presented evidence that journalists had obtained sensitive or classified information, often monthly and sometimes multiple times per month, including operational plans and intelligence assessments. Judge Michelle Childs dissented, writing, quote, an injunction is not an invitation to circumvention. We seriously live in a country where the media is suing the Pentagon because they want to be allowed unfettered access to the most top secret, I guess there's Area 51, but like the Pentagon is important. There's stuff going on there. And they think, oh no, we should just get to wander around wherever we want. Like this video, hit subscribe if you think maybe we shouldn't let New York Times reporters wander around the Pentagon freely. On Tuesday, April 28th, the Justice Department sued Cloudera Inc., alleging the company discriminated against U.S. workers while sponsoring temporary visa holders for permanent jobs. DOJ says Cloudera used a separate hiring process for at least 7 perm-related technology jobs from March 31st, 2024 until at least January 28th of 2025. The complaint says those jobs paid between $180,000 and $294,000 per year. Cloudera allegedly told applicants to send resumes to a dedicated email address, but that address did not accept external emails. One U.S. worker received a bounce-back message saying the group may not exist or the sender may not have had permission to post. DOJ says Cloudera did not hire any U.S. workers for the 7 positions during the relevant period. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said, quote, employers cannot use the perm sponsorship process as a backdoor for discriminating against U.S. workers. You can read more about perm and this case at thecoldtake.com. Saturday, May 2nd, Spirit Airlines shut down operations. The company said all flights were canceled and customers should not go to the airport. Spirit said it had tried to restructure, but a recent material increase in oil prices and other business pressures damaged its financial outlook. CEO Dave Davis, whose parents should win an award for naming creativity, said the airline had reached a March agreement with bondholders that could have allowed Spirit to emerge from Chapter 11, but the sudden rise in fuel prices left the company needing hundreds of millions of dollars that it simply did not have. The collapse followed Spirit's second Chapter 11 filing in 2024. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said DOT coordinated with other airlines to help Spirit customers rebook and connect Spirit employees with job opportunities. Duffy also blamed the blocked 2024 JetBlue-Spirit merger. The Justice Department said at the time the merger was blocked because it would have meant higher fares and fewer choices. Spirit says credit and debit card purchases through Spirit will be automatically refunded. Vouchers, credits, and free Spirit points will be handled later through the bankruptcy process. Moving over to finance, Wednesday, April 29th, Fed Chair Jerome Powell announced that interest rates will remain stationary for the 3rd straight period. After consistently moving to lower rates through late 2025, the Fed has now kept rates static since January. Powell, who is no longer under investigation for a $1 billion overrun to the Fed office renovation project, still has a contentious relationship with the White House. He maintains that he will not leave the board until the investigation is, quote, well and truly over. Markets remained fairly flat this week. The Dow Jones gained 269 points, closing at 49,499, a half-point gain. A half percentage gain. The NASDAQ closed at 25,114, a 1% gain represented by 278 points. The S&P 500 gained 65 points, almost a 1% gain with a closing value of 7,230. Gold lost more ground this week, with futures trading closing at $4,644 an ounce, a 2% loss. And in sports, Sunday, April 26th, the London Marathon turned into a record book bonfire. Here's the rundown. Kenya's Sebastian Sawe won the men's race in 1 hour, 59 minutes, 30 seconds, becoming the first runner to break 2 hours in a record-eligible marathon. Ethiopia's Yomif Kajelka finished second in 1:59:41, also under 2 hours, and Uganda's Jacob Kiplimo took third in 2 hours, 28 seconds. All three were under the previous world record of 2 hours, 35 seconds. Sawe and Kajelka broke away late, with Sawe making the move inside the final 2 kilometers and closing with a 59:01 second half, meaning he sped up in the second 13 miles of the race. In the women's race, Ethiopia's Tigst Assefa won in 2:15:41, the fastest women's marathon time ever. Helen Obiri finished second in 2:15:53, and Jocelyn Kajepski was third in 2:15:55. This marks the first time 3 women finished under 2:16 in the same race. Another Sebastian, former Formula One driver Sebastian Vettel, also ran the race, finishing in 2:59:08 in his first ever marathon. London got 2 sub-2 hour marathons, 3 men under the old world record, and a women's race that reset the entire top end all in one morning. Sunday, April 26th, Carson Hocevar won the Jack Links 500 at Talladega in his first career NASCAR Cup Series win. The race turned on lap 115 when Ross Chastain pushed Bubba Wallace at the front of the field. Wallace got sideways into the outside wall. Cole Custer moved to avoid him, and the 3-wide pack folded into turn 3. 26 of the 40 cars were collected. The race was red flagged at lap 116, and all drivers who could not continue were checked and released from the infield care center. Talladega just doing Talladega things. 26 cars crashed, 8 cars done for the day, and a first-time winner standing in victory lane. Bubba Wallace finished 36th. Cooper Flagg took the NBA Rookie of the Year award after a tight race between himself and college roommate Con Knappel. He received 56 of the 100 first-place votes after being the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, averaging 21 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 4.6 assists per game this year. He joins Michael Jordan as being the only other rookie in history to lead his team in all 3 categories. He's also the second youngest player to ever win the award, behind LeBron James. Speaking of NBA, 3 of the conference semifinal matchups have been decided. The Suns, Rockets, Nuggets, and Trailblazers were eliminated from the Western Conference. The Thunder will now face the Lakers, and the Timberwolves see the Spurs. In the East, the Knicks eliminated the Hawks, and the 76ers sent the Celtics home. The Cavs and Raptors will play Game 7 of their first-round series tonight, with the Magic and Pistons Game 7 this afternoon. In the NHL, the Stanley Cup playoffs are moving to round 2. In the West, the Kings, Stars, Mammoth, and Oilers are all out. The Avalanche will face the Wild, and the Golden Knights will play the Ducks. In the East, the Hurricanes ousted the Senators, and took Game 1 of Round 2 against Philly, who sent the Penguins home in Round 1. The Sabres, who canceled Boston's postseason, await Game 7 between the Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning on Sunday, May 3rd. Not a good year for baseball or hockey in Boston. You might feel like I'm piling on Boston a little. Well, in the MLB, the Red Sox sit at the bottom of the AL East with a record of 13-20, 9 games back from the division-leading Yankees, who are 22-11. Atlanta holds the best record in baseball. The Braves are 24-10 and sit 7.5 games ahead of the Marlins in the NL East. After more than a month off, F1 returns with a sprint weekend in Miami. Friday, Lando Norris put his McLaren on pole with championship-leading Kimi Antonelli qualifying second ahead of Oscar Piastri. In the sprint, Piastri got around Antonelli, who ultimately finished 6th. Norris won ahead of Piastri, Leclerc, Russell, and Verstappen. In qualifying for the main race, Kimi Antonelli took pole with Max Verstappen in second, followed by the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Due to weather conditions, the start time has been moved up to 1 p.m. Eastern, meaning by the time this video is live, the race will be over. Not to worry though, you can't watch it anyway unless you have an Apple TV Plus subscription and have updated your iOS and the app to the latest versions. Ask me if I'm happy about that. The answer is no. Finally, Saturday, May 2nd, Golden Tempo won the 152nd Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs. The horse was ridden by Jose Ortiz and trained by Cherie DeVoe, who became the first woman trainer to win the Kentucky Derby. Golden Tempo rallied from absolute last in the field and finished the mile-and-a-quarter race in 2 minutes, 2.27 seconds. The finish also put two brothers at the center of the race. Jose Ortiz won after passing Renegade, ridden by his brother, Erod Ortiz Jr., who finished second. And like it or not, that's what happened. I'm Rich Stevens, and this has been The Cold Take. If your brain did a backflip when the king said semi-quincentennial, you may have gone to the Quality Leering Center, where we were taught about World War XI. The table's laughing with me. I love it. All right, lock it in. This is why I have to drink tea. Oh, thanks, Eagle Rare. You're my best friend. Oh, God. Are we crying? Oh, fucking Clown World strikes again.